Good morning. We'll call this meeting of the House Ag and Natural Resources Committee to order. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Fritz, Grills, Hardaway, Harris, Holsey, Hurt, Jones, Marsh, Martin, Reedy, Ritchie, Shaw, Travis, Vital, Wright, Vice Chairman Darby, Chairman Todd. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. We will start off this morning with our Pledge of Allegiance and then our prayer, and Representative Martin will lead us. If you'll please stand.
Let us pray. Lord, we come to you today thanking you for this amazing opportunity to represent this great state and to have this opportunity to share thoughts and ideas together. We pray for those in this community who are hurting and pray that your light continues to shine and your grace shines upon all of us. Thank you again for this opportunity and for all the many blessings you've given upon us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any personal orders today? Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome Ms. Hannah Walker and ask her to stand up. She's shadowing House District 32 office today. Ms. Hannah is from Powell, Tennessee.
Representative Holsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have a shadow out of Bedford County. His name is James Thomas Wood. He's sitting right back in this corner. James, if you'll stand up and let these folks see you.
And Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got two separate things, but first one I wanted to recognize is my shadow for the day. He's from Chairman Hicks' district up there in Sneedville, Mr. Isaac, and in his downtime he likes to keep up with do-it-yourself projects and things of that nature. So if y'all don't mind showing him some love.
Representative Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome Mr. Franklin Farrow from Ottawa, Tennessee. He's president of Morning Point Senior Living, but also serves on the national board of the Trust for Public Land, and very active in our community, statewide, nationwide, on greenways and open spaces and parklands. Welcome, Mr. Farrow.
Speaker Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make everybody aware that today is Lincoln County Hamburger Day on the Hill, and Lincoln County Cattlemen's Association is cooking 1,200 burgers out on the street. So come by on the 8th floor and eat a hamburger around noon today. Thank you.
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. And I just wanted to make the announcement and invite anybody that doesn't have anything going on Saturday. We have the opportunity to welcome or do the House Joint Resolution for the Tennessee High School Rodeo Association's 50th anniversary, and they're going to be doing that at the Agri Center there in Shelby County out there in Memphis. So anybody that doesn't have anything going on, join us out there. It's going to kick off at 7 o'clock on Saturday, April 1st.
Thank you, sir. No other personal orders. I will read our Representative Hardaway. I'm sorry, I missed you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to check with Representative Marsh and see if that burger meat is being inspected by the state or the feds.
That could be considered out of order, but we'll skip that. Timely, though. As Madison County celebrated its bicentennial last year, it's worth noting its agricultural connections. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, families relocating to the Madison County area cleared woods to raise crops and livestock. Prior to the Civil War, most of the agricultural production in West Tennessee was subsistence farming, meaning everyone had a vegetable garden. The first railroad appeared in Madison County in 1858, quickly spawning the Bemis Brothers Bag Company in Bemis, which is now in South Jackson. The emerging rail system solidified Jackson as a hub for the cotton trade and other industrial development. The West Tennessee Experiment Station, currently known as the West Tennessee Research and Education Center, was established in 1907. It's now one of 10 experiment stations in Tennessee. The experiment station became a focal point in Jackson for agricultural research on the production of major crops, including cotton, soybean, vegetables, as well as research on horticultural crops and livestock. The center continues its research and outreach, now focusing on row crops, forestry, and horticultural production. A portion of my college career was spent at the Jackson Experiment Station working on no-till research for corn and cotton. Agriculture in Jackson and Madison County has changed dramatically in the last century. It remains a hub for an array of industries, including agriculture, but there are fewer farmers with larger operations and new technological agricultural advancements that they use. At this point, we will take up our calendar today, and we have first on our list House Bill 993. Representative Powers. We have a motion and a second, sir. You're recognized and properly before us, and you're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. House Bill 993 advances fair and efficient state rather than federal regulation of the Tennessee surface mining and reclamation that's cost-effective for Tennesseans. In 2018, the General Assembly enacted the Primacy and Reclamation Act of Tennessee, directing the governor to pursue state oversight of the act known as primacy. While primacy remains an important goal, it is vital that the state-operated program be fiscally responsible. The state is responsible for 50% of the cost to administer the program, and the federal government is responsible for 50%. In the state's effort to obtain primacy, we learned that many of the sites were underbonded and that $33 million the federal government is liable for would be transferred to us. In light of these findings, this bill would postpone our efforts to obtain primacy until we can be assured that the underbonding is addressed by the federal government. During its postponement period, TDEC will continue to provide annual reports to the speakers of both chambers on surface coal mining in Tennessee. This bill is critical for ensuring that the state-operated primacy program will carry the tradition of fiscal responsibility that has served Tennesseans so well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. I'm seeing an amendment on this bill.
Yes, there is an amendment, sorry.
Can you describe that for us?
Yes, an amendment makes the bill. If it just described it, that amendment number is 5863.
Okay, that's what we have. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Since it makes the bill, without objection, we'll go ahead and put that on. All in favor say aye. Aye. The opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on the bill, and you have described the amendment. Is
Yes,
that correct,
that was actually the amendment made the bill, so the description was for that amendment.
Perfect. Do we have any questions for the sponsor? Representative Shaw.
We gonna get that 33 million back you talked about?
Representative Powers.
Yeah, we haven't spent the $33 million. The $33 million were underbonded, and actually it was up to the federal government or OSM, Office of Surface Mining, to make sure they were bonded correctly. So the $33 million is still owed to the federal government, and they either have to make do with that and just kind of eat it, or they have to get it back from the people that were underbonded. So we're waiting till they get that resolved, but that money has not been, the state has not spent any of that. So we're waiting till that gets paid off. We just don't want to take on a debt that we're not responsible for.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman. All right, just so I can get this straight. So we're not stopping operations, we're just stopping participation in that particular program, because the costs, if things go south and there's no bond, the Fed said they're not going to pick up the costs, and it will fall to the state. Is that pretty much it?
Representative Powers.
Yes, that's pretty much it. We're pausing operations until they get that $33 million debt resolved. Either OSM needs to get the $33 million back from the original underbonded operators, or they need to take care of that and get the money from the federal government, but we're not going to take on their debt that has been incurred because we're not really responsible for it.
Representative Hardaway.
Right, so those operators are the only ones that are impacted. not the industry as a whole.
Representative Powers?
That is correct, yes.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll be voting. Without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 993 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 993 as amended moves on to Finance, Ways and Means.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Next, we have House Bill 523 by Representative Haston. We have a motion and a second, sir. You're recognized on House Bill 523. And I do see an amendment possibly on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it 4796?
That's what we have. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Without objection, we'll go ahead and add that to the bill. Without objection. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on the bill, and it looks like this rewrites the bill.
It does.
Okay, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you,
The
Mr.
bill as
Chairman.
amended.
This was brought to me by a local company in my home county, the Rogers Group, and TDEC has historically for decades granted aquatic resource alteration permits for the purposes of dredging riverbeds that the state owns. This bill simply extends that permit process, allowing it to continue, but now the permittee would be required to pay the state 2.5% of the market value of the finished product that was dredged. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for the sponsor? Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, and good morning to the sponsor. Is that 2.5%, is that a tax that goes into the general fund, or is that a fee that goes towards specific services?
Representative Haston?
The license revenue for the insurance for the issuance of the permits would go to the Environmental Protection Fund. I'm not for sure exactly where the money for the 2.5% would go, but I can try to track that down. It might be in the fiscal note somewhere, but I'm not seeing it off the top of my head.
All right, I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. We'll double check that, but I believe it goes into the general fund like most taxes like that. We can have that corrected if necessary, but I believe that's the case. Any other questions? Question's been called. I do want to, I guess, ask one question myself if we can, if you don't mind, sir. Thank you. Just for clarification, this only pertains to permits where dredging would occur on state of Tennessee property. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 523 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Move on to Finance, Ways and Means.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Next, we have House Bill 599 by Representative Powell. We have a motion and a second, sir, and you are recognized on House Bill 599.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do have a amendment that was added in sub.
Yes, sir.
It's 4236.
Okay, that's what we have. We have a motion and a second on the amendment, sir. So without objection, we'll vote on the amendment to add that at this time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on the bill. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is working to address issues with severe weather we continue to face across the state. It would establish a statewide mesonet system, which is a network of weather monitoring stations to provide soil moisture data. If I could, Mr. Chairman, I've kind of rolled this a few weeks, or I actually didn't roll, I just delayed putting it back on notice in a few weeks so that we could have the state climatologist, Dr. Andrew Joyner from ETSU, come and give testimony.
Okay. Since we have a guest here that's on our list, without objection, we will go out of session and hear from him. We're out of session. Mr. Joyner, if you would just approach and give us your name, your title, and then you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay, can you hear me okay? All right. My name is Dr. Andrew Joyner. I am Associate Professor in Geosciences and the Tennessee State Climatologist at East Tennessee State University. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the work of the committee. I'm very excited about a mesonet. I've been a proponent of this for many years, and I think it has a lot of value to the state. So I really wanted to go through a few things from other states that show how much value these have added to other states. I will mention that 35 other states currently have a mesonet, with 3 more, Arkansas, Wisconsin, and Maryland getting funding for this recently within the past few months. So we'll have 38 states in the country with a mesonet. I'm going to start with Kentucky to our north, that shares our largest border. They're a great model for us in Tennessee. They have a fantastic mesonet established in 2007. They're building about 15 more stations over the past year and this year. They're going to have probably a station in every county, some counties with multiple stations. During the December 2021 tornado outbreak, multiple mesonet stations were in the direct path of the tornadoes there, and Kentucky mesonet personnel were able to communicate with stations and change their reporting to every 3 seconds. They could tell exactly where the storms were, the wind speed intensity, many other details, and they relayed that information to the National Weather Service and state emergency managers, who were able to provide more detailed and prompt warning messages to impacted communities, likely saving lives. In Delaware a few years ago, a rural community was impacted by a very intense but short-duration thunderstorm that dumped over 4 inches of rain in a 35-minute period, causing widespread flooding. The community was originally not part of a disaster declaration and was denied public assistance funds. However, an appeal was submitted using the very high-quality 5-minute data from their mesonet, and the community was able to prove that the storm's intensity with that data. The community was then included in the disaster declaration and received several $1 million in public assistance after the appeal. Oklahoma, which was the first state to develop a mesonet, they're kind of the golden state with that, has numerous agricultural applications that add substantial value to their state. Their peanut leaf spot advisor tool in particular has been highlighted in multiple meetings I've been to. It's a crucial application that's used by many farmers to adjust their spray schedule to reduce their risk. This has saved farmers across the state millions of dollars. North Carolina has a similar tool developed using their own live data from their mesonet. Oklahoma, Missouri, and many other states have developed drift risk tools for farmers that provide current conditions and advise if a temperature inversion or wind speed or wind direction should indicate whether they should spray or not. These conditions are very local, and towered mesonets have temperature and wind sensors at multiple levels, allowing for the development of these types of products. This has saved farmers millions of dollars by reducing pesticide use and accidental crop loss. South Dakota has developed a creative application for assessing drought conditions at various soil depths. They have these sensors at 2 inches, 4 inches, 8 inches, 20 inches, and 40 inches. This has given farmers and drought coordinators a lot of information, allowing them to determine if they have moist near surface but dry subsurface soil conditions. This allows them to target their irrigation schedules and adjust those as needed. On many occasions across multiple states, soil moisture data from mesonet stations have provided justifications for areas and counties to move into extreme or exceptional drought. If an area experiences at least extreme drought for just 1 week, it could allow farmers to obtain federal funds for crop losses related to that drought.
Mr. Joyner?
Go ahead.
That's our 3 minutes.
Thank you.
And we're open for questions. If anyone has questions for you, there's a lot of good information there. I know you were trying to cram in as much as you could. It's a big subject and very important to a lot of us. Any questions for Mr. Joyner? Yes, Representative Grills?
Mr. Chairman, would it be okay if you let him finish his statement on my time?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just have a couple more points here. All states that have mesonets, I mentioned earlier, there's 35, about to be 38, they use archive data that they've collected over time to inform their county level and state level hazard mitigation plans, specifically their risk and vulnerability assessments. Our emergency managers in Tennessee don't have access to data like this. It's made it very difficult for them to know how to actually assess their risk to hazards such as flooding, severe storms, winter weather, and other events. Without this knowledge, they're missing out on millions of federal dollars that could provide funds for specific mitigation projects, such as improved stormwater management, roadway enforcements, to prevent landslides, and bridge and culvert reconstructions to better withstand heavy rainfall events. There's many other examples of how much value mesonets have added to their states and communities. These very high quality and well-maintained stations have a high return on investment for other states. The offices and staff that manage these stations and build sector-specific applications have formed critical partnerships with emergency managers, ag extension agents, farmers, meteorologists, planners, and others. I'm happy to discuss this further and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Representative Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you allowing the expert witness to give his closing remarks. That was going to be my question.
Thank you, sir. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You know, you're one of the few expert witnesses that I actually listened to. So,
Thank you.
A lot of good information. You made it clear that the data collection is good for predictive measures, whether it's mitigation or risk assessment, vulnerability, et cetera. is this going to be useful in real time in alerts and warnings?
Absolutely. I think we've seen
And
that.
if you would include with the regular weather risk, include seismic activity.
Mr. Joyner?
Okay, thank you. Yes, it definitely helps in real time. I know that there are many examples across other states that have a mesonet. Kentucky, I know the most about. They work very closely with their National Weather Service. And the example I gave for the tornado outbreaks in December 2021, they were providing live data to the National Weather Service, who could then adjust their warning criteria and be more specific with the communities that were about to be impacted, because they knew exactly the intensity of those tornadoes and where they were at, and likely where they were about to be. Delaware is another good example where they've used their own mesonet data and then the National Digital Forecast Database data to tie in, okay, here's what our conditions are now, and then with the forecast data from National Weather Service, here's how we expect that to change over time. North Carolina also has a really good example with their heat health vulnerability tool, where they've assessed over a period of time increases in emergency room visits related to different levels and heat index and humidity, and how that changes in rural and urban communities across the states. They developed a tool that uses past data and future data that's tied into their mesonet to show, okay, at this time of day, in this community, we're going to be at an extreme heat risk, and you should take a break or not be outside this long, or drink water, and provide that level of detail. We want to do that in Tennessee.
Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, and I'm getting smart about a minute. The impact of your work on our ability to maintain and make sure that our aquifer is intact and adjust our use and our efforts on whether it's in ag or runoff from the city, et cetera. How useful will it be for that assessment?
Mr. Joyner?
I think it will be very useful, and there are other examples in other states as well related to that. I think we would want to work a good bit with the TVA, certainly on reservoir storage, and maybe provide more information to help them make their decisions. But I also think it will help our aquifer too, especially those soil moisture sensors, soil temperature and soil moisture at different depths. We've seen how useful that is in a number of other states, and I think it would be very useful for better understanding our aquifer levels and our water levels and how to better manage those resources.
Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think when we have another NCEL, National Caucus of Environmental Legislators meeting on the Mississippi River, Mr. Chairman, we should invite this young professor.
I think that's a good idea, sir. Representative Harris?
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. So when you spoke to it a little bit earlier, but how would having a mesonet system actually save lives in the state of Tennessee?
Mr. Joyner?
I think the best example is back to that Kentucky example. Kentucky had a major flood last year as well in eastern Kentucky, but the tornado outbreak in particular is a good example of providing much more specific information about an event. You can do this with flooding as well. Delaware and a number of other states have a number of tools where they've incorporated elevation models and topography, and they know which sections of their community or which sections of roads may flood. And so if they know the intensity of the rainfall, like we did not know in Waverly, then they could know, okay, this area is very high risk right now or within the next 10 to 20 to 30 minutes because of the accumulated rainfall. And so I do think, especially in the Waverly and McEwen situation, that we could have provided more timely warnings and possibly saved lives. And I think there are good examples in other states where they have done that.
Representative Harris?
Do you think that this could save communities money as well?
Mr. Joyner?
Yes, I definitely think so. I think the Delaware example is a really good one. It was a small rural community. They had this 35-minute rainfall event of about 4 inches. Most of the time, our weather stations or weather data that we have is reported daily. Occasionally, there are some good stations that are hourly. 4 inches over one day is a good rainfall event, but not a flood event. 4 inches in 35 minutes caused major damage, major flooding, major loss of property there. And so this type of information was able to be provided to show, hey, this did happen in this community. And I believe it was $2.7 million that they were awarded in that community through the disaster declaration to help recover.
Representative Harris?
No other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Representative Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Reedy, for Joyner, for being here. Over the last couple of years, Representative Reedy and myself have been involved in legislation, proposed legislation on flood ready and resilience. One of the things that Tennessee has been experimenting with is flood predictor tools. How would this work with some of those tools that TEMA has been working with to develop pilots that could possibly use statewide?
Mr. Joyner?
I think it would go hand in hand with that. Being able to provide data in real time every 5 minutes or shorter, there's two-way communication with these towers, so we can adjust that. That's what they were able to do in Kentucky with the tornadoes. And so if we have that dynamic information about here's how much rain we're seeing every 5 minutes, every 3 minutes, every minute, and get that intensity information, which really causes the flooding, and tie that into gauge stations or more of an advanced gauge network, then they go hand in hand and really help improve our predictive capabilities.
Representative Vital?
Thank you. Ultimately, obviously, it's about saving lives, but also mitigating risk from an insurance perspective. And so anything we can do in advance to save 5-10 minutes with flood, landslides, I think is very applicable. So thank you for being here.
Representative Ritchie?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Joyner, for being here. Question I've got, this sounds like it's something that we definitely need. What's the coverage area of, say, one particular mesonet location? And then secondary on that right there is, I know in the bill it calls for at least one in each county. From your experience, based on what each mesonet would end up covering, is that sufficient to give us adequate data, or will we have void spots in some rural areas based on that right there?
Mr. Joyner?
We may end up with some spots, and I think that that's something that we would look to maybe in a future phase 2 or something. I think one mesonet station in every county would be excellent. It's very similar to the density of stations that they have in Kentucky. The idea with a station 2 is the siting of it's extremely important. You can't put these next to a road, next to a building, next to a tree, on a building, like you see a lot of your kind of backyard stations. You've got to be really specific with that siting. So the idea is that it would be representative of its community, not just its very specific location. And so you should have, with one mesonet station ideally located around the center of a county, it should largely represent that county. You're going to have some issues in more mountainous counties where you've got Sevier County is a great example. You go from under 1,000 feet to over 6,000 feet. And so counties like that may deserve or may warrant a look at 2 or 3 stations to get a better view of exactly what's going on at each different elevation. That's probably where your gaps will occur. But in most states and the way that they have set these mesonets up, their sites are very representative of the county that they're in. And so that's what we would aim to do and work with the Army Corps and TEMA on a suitability and feasibility model for exactly where we should put these.
Representative Ritchie?
Thank you. And then last question is, when we're talking about location of, is there any, with me being in real estate, I get a lot of questions from clients that are looking to purchase something based on radio transmissions and frequencies that come off of that. Are there any concerns with these mesonets when it comes to living in close proximity or being exposed to whatever might be putting off?
Mr. Joyner?
I have not heard of any concerns like that in other states. They are the cell communication, so Verizon or AT&T or something like that would be what would be used. And so I haven't heard of any concerns like that. I've had a number of emergency managers and farmers, because I've presented on Mesonet before at different meetings and conferences, and they've reached out to talk about wanting one in their county and having space for that. So I haven't heard that as a concern as far as that type of impact.
All right, Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. Got a few questions here. As far as like the crop insurance uses, you had the PRF coverage or whatever it may be. How would that work if you were a farmer and you wanted to like challenge some of the insurance data? How would you do that? And would this be a tool that would do that?
Mr. Joyner?
Absolutely. So I think the idea here is to improve how we provide information to the U.S. Drought Monitor. And so if we have better data, especially soil moisture data, then we should be providing better information to the U.S. Drought Monitor for where they draw those lines. And then hopefully it would avoid the issue with crop law, with a farmer contesting that.
Okay.
Chairman Grills?
Thank you, sir. So if you had, like this past summer, we had an extreme drought in West Tennessee. We're looking at, we're getting all our data from, was it Kansas?
Nebraska.
Nebraska, okay, Nebraska. And they're telling everyone in Tennessee how dry it is in Tennessee when they're not here. And then USDA looks at their data and they decide which is a distressed county, which is a county that needs help from data from Nebraska. Would this right here be a tool that would be able to say, all right, guys, what the drought monitor was saying versus what my district was actually living was not accurate? And we need tools, and would this be a tool that would help, counteract that or challenge that?
Mr. Joyner?
Absolutely, and I'll elaborate a little bit on that process for the drawing of the drought areas. So myself and my team at the Tennessee Climate Office, we actually submit feedback every week to the U.S. Drought Monitor specific to Tennessee. They don't have to take that feedback. It's ultimately up to those authors. But we do provide, we're the first entity to provide Tennessee-specific information to the Drought Monitor. We've been doing that for several years now. And so we try to be accurate with what we represent. At the same time, we don't have the soil moisture data that these sensors would provide. And so we can only go off of satellite data and some other information as far as rainfall goes. There's also a tool called the Condition Monitoring Report. It's a very simple kind of online app that farmers or ag extension agents could use, and we need to do a better job of letting them know that it exists. And so they can report their conditions, take a picture of their field, and upload that to the app. And so then we can say, okay, we were a borderline D2, D3, or maybe extreme drought, and so this looks like extreme drought to me. So let's push for that to be drawn that way. And we can advocate for that more so with better data and with better information from the farmers.
Chairman Grills?
Thank you, sir. So you feel like the U.S. Department of Agriculture would be willing to sit and listen to it if we had data that we could prove was accurate? Okay, who is actually, is this data accessible by the public, or is it just, okay, and how does that work, and what's the way that the public can access it?
Mr. Joyner?
There's a number of ways that other states do this. Most often, there's a website that has starts with a map. Kentucky, Oklahoma, North Carolina, those are great examples if you want to look them up. Start with a map with the most basic data, the temperature, the precip, all at that station, and they interpolate it for the state. And so they fill in the gaps with a surface model of temperature and precipitation. You can dig deeper into each of the sensors and get that other information. A lot of states don't provide to the public all of the granular detail. It can be requested, but the major details are publicly available on a web interface or an app. And so the goal is for it to be as accessible as possible.
Chairman Grills.
Mr. Chairman, this is my last question, I think. The $3.4 million price tag, or the physical note on it, what does that get us as legislators or Tennesseans? What will we see if this program were enacted?
Mr. Joyner?
I believe that $2.7 million of that would be to build the 95 stations. So that would pay for the towers, the sensors, all that technology to be built. I believe it's about $30,000 or $31,000 per station, and then the about $700,000, $750,000 would go towards annual maintenance and the support staff. And so we would have field technicians, quality control analysts, we want people to trust the data, and so it's critical that you have staff monitoring the data daily and then developing products from that. Developing that web interface that always works, so you've got your IT staff there, and then you've also got your service climatologists that are communicating about what are the needs, what do we need to develop for the public, what do we need to develop for state agencies. All of that would be part of the staffing that would be the recurring cost.
Thank you.
Chairman Grills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here.
Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time today, sir. Just two quick questions. What is the footprint of each one of these stations, and will they be located exclusively on public lands, or will there be private partnerships as well?
So they would be about 20 to 30 feet by 20 to 30 feet, something like that. So you've got a pretty narrow tower, 10-meter tower, 33-foot tower, and then you usually have a separate rain gauge, solar panel, so that you don't have to have connected power, data loggers, all that. So it doesn't take up a large footprint. And then your second question was public lands. There are a number of other states do a combination of public and private lands, and they sign an MOU with the landowner, if it's private land, but also with public land, to make sure that there's an understanding of this is what's going to be here, these are the expectations. I have had a couple of private landowners reach out to me over the past year or two that said they would love for their farm to have one, because then they have that data right there in their backyard. I think part of the feasibility component of the suitability and feasibility study that Army Corps and TEMA and Climate Office are doing would relate to who owns the land and how feasible is it to put it there. So I think public lands would be a very good place for that. It could be state-owned, university-owned. It could even be county-owned with school systems or something like that, where you can integrate it into maybe even K through 12 education.
Seeing no other questions, Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you linking it to K-12. Could you help those who, like me, may have had to look up mesonet on the origin and the meteorological term, et cetera?
Mr. Joyner?
Yeah, so the term mesonet is short for mesoscale network. And so mesoscale is related to the extent of the weather and the climate, the data that it's gathering. And so the idea is that these stations are not micro, they're not just around their local area, they're representative of their larger area. And then of course it's a network of multiple stations. It can't just be a few stations across the state to really develop the value-added products that we would need. So that's kind of that second component of that.
All right, thank you, sir. Do you have another question, Representative Hardaway? Okay. Seeing no others, before we go back into session, I want to take a moment of personal privilege. We've had Kyle Mallory come in from Stewart County and brought in what looks to be the Casey Kasem Top 40 from Stewart County. This is the top 40 graduating seniors from Stewart County, and we really appreciate you guys being here and being part of the state government. If y'all give them a hand. Okay, we do have one more question that has generated. To Chairman Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where does the technology come from? Where is it built? Who has proprietary, ownership of it?
Mr. Joyner?
So most often states use the company Campbell Scientific for sensor purchasing, and then a lot of the additional componentry or whatever else they need to do is done in-house at many mesonet sites. Welding is done in-house, calibration, a lot of that's done in-house. But there's a lot of support from other states. Oklahoma in particular has a lot of calibration technology, and they have different kind of rooms and labs that they can calibrate sensors with. And so there could be cross-state collaboration as far as some of that goes. But a decent amount of work is done in-house, but the Campbell Scientific is normally the main provider of these types of tools.
So it's American-made?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, and we appreciate you being here and helping share this information with us, sir. Very valuable.
Thank you.
Without objection, we'll go back into session. And we are back on the bill as amended. Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say to the sponsor, thank you for bringing this legislation. I think it's very important. I've been kind of familiar with this program for a long time in my own work, and I really appreciate you bringing it. I think it would provide not only safety, but even save us a lot of money and answer a lot of questions that insurance companies and other people may have in the future. So I appreciate you bringing it. Thank you.
Representative Powell.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to say a couple things. One is I have been working with TEAM on this. I'm proud TEAM actually, their headquarters are in my district, but they've been very kind working with this and making sure that we found the appropriate place for this, whether that was TDEC or TEMA, and TEMA really wanted to have ownership of that. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your interest in this, and also Chairman Grills. I think this is a very important issue statewide, and apparently, especially for those of us who, like Chairman Reedy, their communities have been impacted with flooding. We'll make sure everything we can to protect the agriculture and everything it provides, but also protect the safety of Tennesseans. So, and I, again, appreciate your indulgence in listening to all of Dr. Joyner's answers and addressing this. Science was my worst subject in school, and so I was glad that he could come up and answer those difficult questions.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments for our sponsor? Seeing none, without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 599 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. This moves on to Finance, Ways, and Means, sir. Next, we have House Bill 394 by Representative Reedy. We have a motion and a second. Sir, you are recognized on House Bill 394.
And Mr. Chairman, as you can tell, my supporters are here. The top 40 is from Stewart County. You kind of stole my thunder. Of course, thank you to Mr. Kyle Mallory, and of course their SRO that's here to support them. And it's an exciting day for them, a tour of the Capitol. I mean, things that we wish that we could do when we were their age. But they are the new leadership that's going to one day take our places here. On this bill, Mr. Chairman, of course, worked with Department of Agriculture. So we've got a new amendment, and that amendment drafting code is 6157.
That's what we show, sir. It says it rewrites the bill. We have a motion and a second. Since it rewrites the bill, we'll go ahead and put it on. All in favor of adding Amendment 6157, drafting code, to House Bill 394, say aye. All, and any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on the bill, sir. You're recognized on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members. What was it, 2 weeks ago? Our discussion with the commissioner that was here, what we discovered is the timeline in getting what we need done as far as what we are calling the Tennessee, let me get the name right. It would be the Tennessee Meat and Meat Products Bill. We found out that we need to work on an MOU with USDA, the federal government, that will take up to 12 months. Then the second thing that we found out is in that process that we needed to make sure we had an administrator. So what the amendment does, it allows the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture to hire an administrator and an assistant to that administrator to start having that conversation and allowing the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture to have that conversation to get the ball rolling. And here's where I'm challenged. It was a couple of the members says the financial impact. What happens on this bill, because it does have a fiscal note. And of course, the previous bill, it's interesting. The financial impact to the state is very important with, over $3 million on the Mesonet systems. Well, what we're going to talk about and what I'm going to finish with and take questions if there are any, what has the state of Tennessee already been doing as far as meat processing, or agriculture, period, in the state of Tennessee? And Mr. Chairman, you're certainly familiar with this. I hope that everybody is. There's the Tennessee Agriculture Enhancement Program. That program is a financial impact of $136.4 million already, 6,241 projects. It reached out to all 95 counties. So a total spent was $35.5 million in funding. The grants, 10,217. And it's for all aspects of agriculture. Now let's get more specific in what we're going to call the Tennessee Agriculture, the Agriculture Enterprise Fund. And that's just been in place for a couple of years. They have created 653 jobs, 1.3 million total investment. There was 42 recipients. Now I'm going to read out the recipients and what they were wanting the grant money for, and then you tell me if the meat bill would fit into what they are trying to do business-wise. One went out to agritourism. One went out to the commercial kitchen. Two went out to craft alcohol. One to a feed mill. One to it's 5 in food manufacturing. 16 to forest products, fruit and produce, Representative Tandy, 1 went out there. Meat processing, 15. And the reason I bring up 15, I have a friend in Montgomery County that just opened a slaughterhouse. I spoke with him last week, and he says, I'm all about this Tennessee meat inspection. It would really help his business flourish. And then we just recently come out March 1st, a grant program, statewide agriculture grants. Let's see, I already read that one. But it was called Farm Program, $50 million for the next 3 years that have been earmarked. And it was the Farm Program, which stands for Forest, Agriculture, and Rural Markets. And so that money is being made available now. And hopefully we can get this bill across the finish line, do what we need to do. Still, we already said, if you're USDA inspected, we're not taking that away. But the new folks coming online, if they want to be inspected by the state of Tennessee to sell It's like we're being fed today by the Lincoln County farmers. If they wanted a quality product on my farm, I don't use antibiotics or hormones in the growing of my cattle. So I've got people waiting in line. When I finish out a steer, they want to buy that animal. So if a local church group or the cattlemen's wanted a stamp from Tennessee saying, I'd rather have Tennessee than USDA, then I could sell them 200 pounds, 500 pounds of hamburger. But right now, when somebody buys it, you're going to buy half my animal or the whole thing. I deliver it to the slaughterhouse, then you decide the cuts that you want, and then you pick it up, and then hopefully you have freezer space to put that animal in. So with that, I'll stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir, for that description. Chairman Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Reedy, this kind of parallels with the way TDEC operates. Would that be fair?
That would be correct.
Okay, so TDEC and how TDEC and EPA, they work together, and TDEC provides a better product, in my opinion, an easier working environment, especially for the people that I've experienced. So do you feel like if this bill moves forward that every farmer and every slaughterhouse will have a better working relationship with their inspectors and the Tennessee Department of Agriculture?
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Grills, you're absolutely correct. And the first bill we had on the calendar as far as primacy, Tennessee, we're the only ones that don't control our own mining operation, and so we've been working on that since 2014, trying to get primacy there. We can, and that's what this bill will do, is give primacy to the state of Tennessee. We do have FEMA, we do have TEMA, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency. And so with that, I believe that we as the state of Tennessee, we're more efficient and manage our money a lot better than the federal government. So if there's any way in this bill or any other bill, if we can control what we do for Tennessee and Tennesseans, I think Tennessee would be a state that's better off.
Chairman Grills.
One more point here. A couple of years ago when we had the COVID crisis, the U.S. Department of Agriculture told Tennessee that their inspectors, they were going to remove their inspectors if we were to pass the law that said that employers could not require their employees to wear a mask. And that right there in itself, the U.S. Department of Agriculture could have shut down all slaughterhouses in Tennessee. And the people of Tennessee, whether it was a hog slaughtering facility, a chicken slaughtering facility, or whatever, could have lost their, could have backed up, lost their product, and several animals would have been ready to have been slaughtered, but they could not have because of bureaucracy at the federal government. Tennessee does a better job of handling things of that nature. So I feel like this is very important for the future security of our food and the future security of our nation. So thank you for that. Thank you for bringing this.
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Grills, and you're right. What took place, because it happened to me, my farm, my animals, when you take that animal, let's say, to the sale yard, and if it was a USDA inspected slaughterhouse, if one person got sick that was on that shift, that crew, they were shutting down slaughterhouses left and right because they were being federally inspected. And what happened, it put many people, and it was I was standing in the back, we were talking about this bill 2 weeks ago, and there happened to be another cattle farmer who said, I've got 13 animals ready right now, but I'm still on the waiting list to have the first one slaughtered because we are so backdated with facilities, and I get it. There's the local facilities are still jammed full, but I made the point, it's just like Chairman Darby, when the fruit and vegetables are ripe and ready to go to market, they're ready to go to market. We cannot stop. Well, it's the same thing with livestock. And so we had some hogs ready for slaughter, but when you feed out hogs that are already, they're in their prime, but you try to maintain the weight on them, but you got to feed them for another 2 months, you can't get that cost back when you finally get it to the USDA inspected slaughterhouses where the folks want them, when they buy them from you, they dictate who they want to process that animal. But you're right, and I hope that we never go through the COVID-19, anything like that ever again in the future for the sake of our nation.
Representative Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, quick question. I do support this bill. I think it's strong for the protection of the quality of food and for sourcing. We better understand our sources and keep sources local. I do have a question about the livestock category. We have cattle, sheep, swine, and goats, and deer. No buffalo?
Representative Reedy.
I think that's a good chance for an amendment on there, but let's not call them buffalo, let's call them bison.
Bison.
Thank you, sir.
We can work on that. Thank you.
I think that's a good suggestion. Don't have anybody else on the list, so without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 394 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves on to government operations, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and committee, and when you see our young people out in the hall, introduce yourselves to the fine young people from Stewart County. I'm excited. It's through redistricting. Mr. Chairman, as you know, I inherited Benton County, Stewart County, part of Henry County as well, and some great folks still throughout the state of Tennessee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No question, sir. Thank you, sir. That completes our calendar today. I do have one announcement I will mention. Next Wednesday is Ag Day. It's April 5th, and I want to recognize Chairman Grills to give us a quick rundown of that. And I will say this, our meeting time and place is subject to a scheduling issue right now. We're working on that, but we know approximately when it'll be. Representative Grills?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next Wednesday morning, we'll have Ag Day. We'll have biscuits on the 8th floor starting at 7:30. Shortly after that, I believe at 9 o'clock, we're going to be out on the Harwell Plaza with the corn shelling contest. It will be the House versus the Senate versus the governor's office. So we hope we can pull this one off, ladies and gentlemen. But we hope we have good weather. Do hope everyone participates, shows up, comes by, and sees the different vendors we'll have. We'll have several tractors, different equipment, and partners in the farm organization. So I appreciate y'all coming by and participating and supporting.
It's going to be a great day. And again, the schedule, we're not sure if it's going to be 10 or 10:30 or exactly what room, but we will be having another ag meeting to recognize that day, and we'll have a number of folks doing presentation and speaking that day. So with no other business before the committee, we will, and without objection, we will stand adjourned.